Thanks everyone for joining today. So this is a special session today because we have a panel of companies that I've worked with, and I have 4 exciting people on the call that are really the internal champions of their organization. So we want to have a discussion with them after we go through a quick presentation on reformulating your mindset. So the reason I put this series together and the mindset piece is because mindset's so important, of having the right mindset to achieve breakthrough improvement. And when we're talking breakthrough improvement, again, it's significant improvements, not just small incremental improvement, but getting big gains for your organization in a short period of time. So I have a few quotes that I like that are really around mindset. So one of them from Henry Ford is, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Another one from FDR, men are not prisoners of fate, but only prisoners of their own minds. Another one from Albert Einstein, we cannot solve problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. And then one of my favorites from Dr. Deming, each system is perfectly designed to give you exactly what you are getting today. So some quotes about mindset, about how important it is to have the right mindset when you're looking to become a high-performing organization and implementing operational excellence. So let's talk about mindset. So what is mindset? So it's a set of beliefs or a way of thinking that determines someone's behavior, outlook, mental attitude that impacts someone's outcome or someone's endeavors. And if we look at that from an organization perspective, what's organizational mindset? It's really those beliefs and ways of thinking that an organization behaves and affects their outcome of their own endeavors. And again, outlook and mental attitude. So of course, to get breakthrough improvement, sometimes we need a shift in mindset. So the mindset really drives the organizational culture. So every company I go into, of course, the first thing I hear is we're different. And if I had $1 for every time I heard that, I probably would be retired by now. But what is different when every organization is culture. So a lot of companies are struggling with the same types of issues. And so a lot of generic problems that I see are common across many different companies. So on our panel today, we have actually 4 different environments. So we have a company that's make to order. We have a company that's engineer to order. We have a company that's configure to order, I call it, and another company that's a project management company. So it'll be interesting from their perspectives with their different organizations and different types of businesses, what they see. And so that organizational culture is the underlying beliefs or assumptions and values within an organization and the ways of interacting that contribute to a unique social and psychological environment. So this picture here, we have mindset in the middle. So mindset affects attitude, it affects behaviors, it affects what actions we're taking, and also what results and what performance the company is achieving. So we want to understand, okay, when we have a certain mindset, how is that blocking us from getting higher performance? And so what is the correct mindset for a company, and how do we change the mindset? So I have a process that I sort of go through. So the first step is conscious awareness. So what is conscious awareness? It's being aware of what's happening in your current environment. So not only what's happening in your own function, but how your function is affecting other functions in the organization. So first step is, do I understand the things that I'm doing and what effects that might be having on other functions in the organization? So first step is, let's be aware of what's happening. And then there's a lot of reactive attitude that I see. So it's dealing with problems or issues after they occur. So, okay, we're having these issues, and how do we deal with it? We just react, and then we react and we become reactive in nature instead of being proactive. So how do we get that mindset shift? So next step is, we got to shift our perspective. So what is perspective? It's the way you look at something. And so what I try to do is I try to bring in a shift in perspective, say, okay, instead of looking at it from this perspective, what happens if we look at it from a different perspective? And you'll be amazed what people see when you change their perspective. And I think everyone's seen those different exercises where they have a picture and they have everybody look at the picture and see what they see, and people see different things. So they're looking at the same picture, but seeing different things. So that's what we want to do, is we want to take the current situation and have people look at it and then look at it from a different perspective and see what they can see from a different perspective. Then we got to change the paradigm. So what is a paradigm? It's a way of thinking or a belief. So to get big gains in performance, we need to challenge some underlying assumptions and then recalibrate our mindset under a new way of thinking. Then we can move to a proactive attitude and prevent issues before they occur. Okay, so this is sort of the steps that I go through to change mindset. So I'm going to go through these steps with an example, and then after the example, we can open it up for a discussion. So conscious awareness, regardless of the type of issues we face, we must be excellent in what we call cause and effect thinking. So what is cause and effect thinking? First of all, what's an effect? So the effect is an outcome of an action or consequence. It's really the symptoms that we're seeing within the organization. What is a cause? It's something that brings about that effect or result. What's a root cause? It's the initiating cause or a condition or causal chain that leads to an outcome or effect of interest. And so what does that mean? So let's look at a reactive attitude environment. So I just took this objective here. We strive to ensure that we achieve high quality. So I don't think anybody would disagree that we need to achieve high quality within our organization. So what do a lot of people do to achieve that? They put it in action. Oh, we put in-process inspection to ensure quality. So we do some activity and then we inspect it to see if it's correct or not. But then what happens is what we see as an undesirable effect is occasionally nonconformances get through the controlling process undetected. So we have an issue, it gets not detected till later in the process. And then what happens when we find it later? There's items that require rework, and then we have errors in the information. So this can be either information or product flow. What's the effect of that? Resources spend time on non-value added activities. They're reacting to problems. And of course, that negatively affects productivity. So when I go back and say, okay, what's the mindset that's causing us to choose this action? And so the mindset I see is that inspection-based quality is 100% 100% effective. So if we want to ensure quality, we do inspection to make sure that stuff is correct before we move it on. But how effective is 100% inspection? So that's a good question, right? So I want to challenge this mindset that 100% inspection is 100% accurate. So I have this exercise that I do with companies called the Gremlin exercise. And so there's this story here. And what you need to do is read through the story one time, and the letter G is a defect. And so what I ask people to do is read through the story and tell me how many defects are in this story. And so what's the result? So I just ran this last week with a company, and this is the results that we got. So there was like close to 30 people. And you see we had a range of 59 to 87. And we had all different answers from the exercise. What's the right answer? 83. So this simple exercise of reading through the story, finding the number of G's, only one person out of like 30 got the correct number. So how accurate is 100% inspection? And this is a single criteria, right? It's either a G or it's not a G. So there's no variation in the decision making. And I let them do it uninterrupted. Okay, so one person out of 30 got the right answer. So that was sort of mind-blowing for them. So if we go back to our cause and effect, we say, okay, we have these negative effects happening. Our action is we have in-process inspection, and our mindset is inspection-based quality is 100% effective. But what we now understand is 100% inspection is not 100% effective. So if 100% inspection is not 100% effective, and we do this in-process inspection, we're going to see these results. So what should the mindset be? So we need to change our mindset from inspection-based to process control-based. So if we go to process control, the action we should be taking is we have process controls to ensure quality. Then if we have that, then nonconformances are prevented at the controlling process. That's the proactive mindset. And then what product meets specs, information is accurate, resources spend time on value-add activities, and productivity increases. So by reformulating our mindset from inspection-based to process control-based, it changes our whole perspective and our outcomes of the business. So that's sort of my short presentation on mindset and perspective. And then I want to open it up now. So I want to introduce our panelists. And so our 4 panelists. So our first panelist is Stacy France. So she's with Allegheny Surface Technologies. And I'll do a quick bio on her. So Stacy has a background, her education's in actually accounting. So she has an accounting degree, or a business administration degree from University of Pittsburgh, and is a certified management accountant. She has a lot of experience in a lot of different industries. So she has experience in manufacturing, 18 years, 7 years in distribution, and 8 years in retail. So she's got a broad range of experience. I worked with her several years ago at Top Line Process Equipment Company, where we did some operational excellence activities there. Our second speaker, so Stacy at Allegheny Surface Technologies, that's a make to order environment. So what does that mean? So they get orders from the customers, product shows up, they produce it and ship it back to the customer. Second is Patrick Irwin. So he is Vice President of Construction at Leonard S. Fiore. And he has been with the company since 1995. He has a bachelor's degree in structural design and construction engineering technology, as also a certification as a design build professional from the Design Build Institute of America. So he has a really strong background in commercial construction and leading organizations through focused vision and delivering timely results for their customers. Our third panelist is Heath Jenkins. He's president of the Press and Automation Division at Gasberry Products in DuBois. So he's got a bachelor's degree in electrical engineering and an MBA from Purdue. He started his career as an application engineer and held various positions in field engineering and regional sales. Then he moved into upper management, where he took senior roles in sales and marketing management for several global manufacturers. And now he's president at Gasberry and really focused on driving the organization forward. And our fourth presenter is Brian Piscatelli. So he's currently plant manager at South Avenue plant at Allegheny Bradford Corporation. He holds a bachelor's degree in plastic engineering technology from Penn State Erie, the Barron College. And prior to working at ABC, he was actually in a sales role at KOA Spears and worked in that industry for 21 years before coming over to ABC in 2016, and then moved into the plant manager position in 2019. So I've done work with all 4 of these people. Again, they're really the leaders in their organization in terms of driving operational excellence. So welcome everyone to the discussion today. So I'd like to start out with maybe someone talking about mindset a little bit in their organization and what mindset was before we worked together, and then the mindset changed after, and then sort of how that changed the organizational culture. Does anybody want to volunteer to go first?
I don't mind, Max. I'll go ahead and walk through that.
Okay.
Thank you for the introduction and for the brief overview on mindset. As you mentioned, I was with Top Line Process Equipment Company, and the business had been around for more than 50 years, and in the configure to order or business, because we had a number of parts and the customer would tell us how they wanted the parts put together before they were shipped. But we also did a little bit of manufacturing to fill the gaps of the standard product line. And there was, before we worked with Max, the company had grown for 50 years without a global view. So all the systems were disjointed, the flow of information and the flow of product were ineffective, they were inefficient. the on-time delivery rate in a business that is distribution based was below 80%, which is a pretty big miss from where you really need to be. And we struggle to have the right inventory at the right times to support the customers. And the sales and operations were really divided into two different camps. We had difficulty getting those two groups to work well together. And there was a lot of reactive firefighting. And while everybody was working hard, they were all victims of bad systems. So 4 employees, myself included, went to Max's operational excellence classes, and we were looking to see what should we fix first, because there was enough broken. We didn't even know where to start. So it was really about getting us all, both sales and operations and all the leadership, to say, can we agree that staying in our own camps and trying to solve stuff in our own area is not going to solve the bigger problem? And what should we work on first? And so that was really the catalyst for us to say, okay, we have to do something different. Then we went, just like Max said, we went through and discussed all the negative effects we were having. And out of that, we had built a current reality tree. And then we used that inclusive process. So all of the managers were present when we went through all of our problems and really try to map out what was the future that we wanted and what were we going to have to change in order to get that future. And once we had the list of everything that we were going to solve, we didn't know how we were going to solve it. So we had to have this open mindset that we don't know what the answer is right now, but we'll all work at it and we'll get the answer. We'll find a way to find a solution to this problem once we agreed the problem existed and it needed solved. And so the value stream map that we created was really, I think, instrumental in trying to get the flow of information and product working. And that really helped us understand how the actions each of us were taking were affecting each other. And all of the non-value added mess that we had created because we had so many problems, there were too many band-aids. And so by getting the value stream map done, we could really see what we were looking to accomplish. The hardest part and the biggest mentality and mindset hurdle that we had beyond trying to get from reaction to proaction was that you still had to keep the fire hose on the old fires while you're trying to build the new world, right? And so you felt like you were trying to do both at the same time. And there were periods where you thought, I can't hold the hose anymore. I can't get this built at the same time. And you really just had to just believe in where you were going well enough to say, but I'll just hold it just a little longer. We'll do this. And everybody was in that boat. So every single manager that was involved, we were all holding the hose and building the new house together. And while there were struggles, we also immediately started to have some wins, and those smaller wins led us to the bigger wins, which then led us to finishing the project. And we as a group learned to think globally, that my actions impact somebody else. And by looking at the whole system, we were able to see how could we add a check somewhere that's the right check at the right time that prevents the problem. And we were able to craft that together without adding a bunch of non-value added, after the fact checks. And I have to say, the change was so amazing. When we got to the proactive environment, the chaos had dropped so much. At one point, we had an employee who said, if I could just spend half of my day, if I could get 50% of my day back, that I'm not chasing around looking for answers to try to answer a customer because things are late or we don't know or we can't see, then I would call this project a success. And by the time we were done, we were above 95% on time. We held that consistently. We had periods above 98% on time. No employees were checking on anything. The systems worked and they delivered the right outcome. And the managers had a couple of places that we could see whether things were on course. We were looking for normal and abnormal. And it was really amazing. And I'll just share as a final point, that company had been sold a couple of years ago, which is why I'm now with Allegheny Surface Technology. And in that sale, the new owners, talked with every employee, and they said, "What's the best thing about working here?" And they got such a profound answer. Operational excellence is the best thing about working here, that they came back to me to sit down at my desk and say, "Tell me about this operational excellence, because your people can't say enough great stuff about it." And so I talked with them about these changes, and they loved their job so much more when they weren't firefighting, when we weren't, whipsawing them from one thing to the next. It really had a profound effect. But it all started with our decision that we were going to stop being reactive and start being proactive, and that we were going to do the hard work to fight the fire and build the house at the same time. But it was completely worth it. And I'm now doing that for myself and this other organization as we work through the same kinds of issues when things are not built globally. So I think that kind of wraps up the mindset points that I plan to share today.
Yeah, so I want to tell my favorite Stacy story. So, she was like, again, the holding the fire hoses and be like, we're spending all this effort, we're not seeing results. So we're struggling with the on-time delivery. So the on-time delivery was hovering, and it wasn't, it was slowly going up. But, I was watching the data, and I was also watching the average days late of every order. So I could see the average days late coming down, coming down, coming down. I said, Stacy, in like 3 weeks, it's going to flip. She goes, okay, I hope so. So like 3 weeks later, she called me. She goes, it's like the clouds parted and the sun came out, because we went from like 80% to immediately like 95. It like jumped up dramatically. And then they were able to sustain that level for quite a period of time. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, Stacy.
Oh, it is so true. And it was amazing too, because I had to call him because 3 different things we were trying to achieve all came together at exactly the same week. I remember it. The last week of June of that year, we finished the project at the end of February, right? So our work was done and we were like so impatient. When is it going to finally work? And then it all came together because all the old stuff that was done the wrong way still had to make itself through the process, right? So it's not like you flip the switch and all the old work's good too, right? So we had to work our way through the old work, and it was the last week of June, and I called Max up to say, I can't believe it. It all came together in the same week. But when you think about it, we changed the systems at a certain point, and then those systems started working, and then we saw that all the old garbage was gone and all the new stuff worked. And really, Max described it well about the clouds parting, because it was amazing. And it was amazing that we were able to sustain it week after week after week. We just never took a step back from there. It was great.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stacy. Anybody else want to make a comment?
I guess I'll jump in. It was interesting, to hear Stacy talk about the firefighting and holding the hose in. One of the things that it was apparent to me when I first came on board and took over 2 or 3 years ago was that we had sort of you talk about mindset. We had a hero culture. We can get things done. We'll roll up our sleeves and we'll make it happen for our customer. And it's kind of a weird position to be in to say that's not a good thing. But ultimately it's not, because I was thinking about the analogy here. I don't know how many people have seen that Will Smith movie, Hancock, but he plays basically a drunken over the hill superhero that whenever he goes to save somebody or do something, he ends up destroying more than he saves. And that was the problem with the hero culture, that yes, we can get it done. Absolutely. We can pull out all the stops and we can really delight a customer. But in that process, we're, the unseen, the unheard, the not greasy wheels of on-time delivery for other customers and other orders that are getting pushed out of the way to make that happen, unfortunately don't get seen. They get seen at the end of the month with on-time delivery and things like that, but they're not as evident. They're not as front and center. So, we had a constant jockeying for position. Just a little bit of background. Gasberry, my company, we manufacture capital equipment and aftermarket parts for powder compaction. We also have an automation segment and a contract manufacturing segment. So there's a lot of ands there, as you can see. Capital equipment is far and away our most important segment, but those other segments, are important too, though. Their customers are important. We want to satisfy everyone, obviously. One of the things we struggled with, because we have such a broad offering, is I call it the three V's. I don't know, Max, if you remember that, but the velocity,
Yep.
the velocity of our products. Some things are needed 9 months from now. A complex piece of capital equipment might be needed 9 months or even a year from now after it's ordered. Other things, there's a press down coming out of our aftermarket division. Hours, it's counted in hours. Can you get this part through your facility, by tomorrow morning? That sort of countdown. So we had differences in velocity. We had differences, such a variety of parts, single parts for the most part, and volume, of course. So those three V's really added a lot of complexity. If for those that are involved in job shops, it's complicated enough to schedule without bringing in capital equipment and some of the other things. So I could see right away that the hero culture, I was going to be the bad guy, I guess, for a little while and say, we don't want that. We want processes that work in a very, very complex environment. And working with Max, we've been able to change that mindset. I think that we do, to Stacy mentioned thinking globally. Our folks now see the global impact of inserting into the schedule. We've reduced that by 80%. It takes a lot of discipline because everybody wants to make those customers happy. We're moving towards a fast lane. So how can we do both? How can we satisfy those unseen customers, those forgotten customers that are trying to get through our standard process? How can we satisfy them, but also the customer that says, I need this, I'll do anything. What do I need to do to get this product through your shop? So we want to do both. So we're going to be setting up a fast lane. We've been talking about that, Max. I mentioned that to you, that's my dream. That's not easy to do. Not too many have that.
I think Brian can make some comments about that because they have the same type of situation.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah. So as Max mentioned, so I've been plant manager here at one of Allegheny Bradford's facilities for the past 2.5 years. And, for me, I kind of came on board right when, we started our engagement with Max. So I got to see it from a little bit different perspective than, say some of the other, team members here who actually lived it for 40, 30, 20, 10 years before me. And, for us, when we talk about, the different perspective, I mean, one thing I quickly learned that, Max definitely had a knack for looking at different perspectives as you went through the process and challenging us with it. And for us, we make custom manufacture of stainless steel process equipment, predominantly pharmaceutical industries. So I'm talking filter housings, heat exchangers. And when we manufacture these, a heat exchanger as example, it essentially breaks down into three components. And for us, when we started out the process, we would start out everything at the same time. All three components would start at the same time, and then they would actually finish at different points. So we had a lot of whip sitting out there. We just used a lot of unnecessary resources at that given moment. And it was, a simple change of, okay, well, let's not start everything together. Let's make sure they finish together. So, staggered starts, redefining a reliable production lead time for each of the components. And with that, we have we were releasing work on a daily basis on a dollar value. But when you compare a lead time of a filter housing to a heat exchanger, it might be 4 to 5 weeks for a filter housing versus, it could be upwards of, 20, 24 weeks for a heat exchanger. And we were consuming, all of the capacity on the heat exchanger side and really not splitting it into the fast lane, you call it, the express lane. So, in the filter housing industry, it's very important to have quick turn, short lead time, short processes. So it was just a more disciplined approach to have reserve capacity for both, so you have that reserve capacity for the quick turn, and then you have, the balance of your capacity for the other products. And then, of course, you're going to hit a period in time where you have to use up some of your other capacity if it does become unused. But again, it's just a discipline. And when you work with Max, it's one thing is you got to follow there's only one rule. It's follow the rules.
Right.
So if you follow the rules, the system works. And Max laughs. It's an easy thing to say, but it's not an easy thing to do.
Those bad habits are hard to break. And,
yes.
And the hero mentality that Heath was talking about, it's hard to get the heroes to stop being heroes and follow the rules. It's extremely difficult behavior change. And I want to talk about Brian too. So the biggest change in perspective for them was that they were constantly focused on shipping. So every day in their production meeting, they would look at the shipping. Look, what's going to ship today? What's going to ship? I said, okay, I want everybody to turn around and not look at shipping. I want everyone to turn around and look at releasing. So no longer looking at the end of the process, we're going to turn around and look at the beginning of the process. Just by shifting that perspective, change the whole paradigm and mindset of the company.
Yeah, because if we start a project, if we start a job on time, we're going to definitely ship it on time. So just by changing that focus, and like I mentioned, splitting it up where we can, stagger starts of the individual components that actually build the heat exchanger, as example. Now we can focus on, getting the long lead part of that heat exchanger started, and then the others will catch up and they finish on time and ultimately ship on time.
Okay, thanks, Brian. So next, Patrick, if you want to make any comments. So Patrick's the project environment. So Stacy's I call them make to order. I call Heath Gasberry engineer to order. And ABC is more of a configured order. So they have designs and then they configure it specific for the customer. And then Patrick comes from the project management environment, which is a little bit different.
Yeah. I was sitting here thinking, and we talked about a little bit before we got on the call. There are a lot of variables that we have in the construction field that you do not have in the manufacturing side. And maybe just back up a little bit. So for our business, we do bid build work, we do negotiated work, we do design assist where we help the designers up front. And then we also have design build where we'll have that will be in charge of the design. And just to give you a little scope of our company, we have around 250 employees currently, and we do about $100 to $120 million a year in construction. Of that, there's a $9 million component of our own self-performed labor. So we are not always building the same product. We're not always building them for the same customers, and we're not always building them in the same environment. But I think what Max really did for us is challenge the mindset of, our industry is so different that we can't possibly get it into a formalized process. So the same things that everybody's talking about, the consistent delivery, poor overall consistent communication was an issue. I call them synergy struggles in terms of having teams on the same page in terms of what the repeatable process is, regardless of what we're building and what that end product is. There are still some sound principles of process that we have to undergo. And then we have a big growth period for our company, and trying to get those processes and procedures down was a real challenge for us. But I think the one thing that is common to the manufacturing arena to the construction arena is the right materials, the right tools, the right equipment, and the right information at the right time. I think one of the things that, and Max was just alluding to, one of the things that we really challenge, and when you say, Heath, when you said about the hero culture, so I don't think in the construction industry, first of all, we all think we're cowboys, and we also think we're heroes, that we're going to pull these projects out at the end. And we focused on the completion, and we didn't focus on as much the start. And some of the things that we pulled of the mindset change is the full kit mentality, and then also then resource allocation. So we've done a lot of in terms of really trying to organize and being smart about how we run our business, because the construction industry is becoming more technical and it is specialized. So you really have to be able to make things as predictable as possible. And our resource allocation, even though we have our labor in just one segment of our business, is the 9 million in labor. But when we looked at over the years, we still, regardless of where our volume at, is that our $9 million worth of labor has not fluctuated a lot. And the mindset of resource application in terms of, let's make sure we have a full kit. And if we don't have a full kit, let's take those resources to the places where we have the full kit, and not just have resources allocated to projects that might not have the right material, tools, equipment. And I know in terms of, when we started this work with Future State, it was right in the middle of the pandemic. And, and now in terms of, coming from the manufacturing side to the construction side, do we have that material, equipment, or parts, or building materials? Do we have them to even start? And we're really, we're still in the midst of that. We're looking at 4 months for a door delivery. That's mechanical equipment, that kind of stuff. So the one thing that I think it might be unique, because it sounds like maybe the whole organization was involved in the other instances. With us, Max took 10 to 15% of our company, project managers, superintendents, operations, executive team. And we went through that training with Max with 10 or 15% of the company. And I laugh a lot because I don't know why he got through and I couldn't get through. Like, we really shouldn't start this if we can't finish. And good thing Max said that. And I felt like I'd been saying it for years, and somehow Max got it through their head. And I think some of the stuff you were talking about earlier on in your presentation, that changing the paradigm, backing out of it, looking at it a different way. But what the process allowed us to do, and we're still using it today, when we did that current reality, and we were able to have all the stakeholders in one room. So again, we're not all on the same site. We're from Maryland up to New York, and all of our players, the key players, aren't always in the same room at the same time, especially from the office to the field. And they could see how their inactions, or inaccurate information affected the project sites, things that they wouldn't normally have made a connection to. So I can tell you that the people who went through the training, their mindset is much more enlightened than the ones that did not. And I think that was a big plus to show us of what that mindset change can do. Stacy, one of the things that you mentioned was this theory of global success. I think that's another thing, because we are geographically separated. It's natural for superintendents and project teams to only think in terms of their projects. What the Future State experience has helped us to do with the full kit and the application of resources has now made us think, okay, well, if I'm the project that doesn't have the information, how can we now take those resources and apply them to the projects that do, get their work done, their end product completed, and then when I do have the information, then reallocate the process. So that global success, I think, is has been a really big eye opener for us. And then I think the one thing that was at least encouraging to me was Stacy's reference to the it sounded like 4 months, make the changes and then see the results 4 months later, because that was the other thing. The people that went through the training were like, okay, what are we doing different tomorrow? How are we going to change all this on my site tomorrow? And not really understanding how the clarification of a repeatable process and communicating and training on that was as important as the changes we would make tomorrow. So, yeah, I think in terms of the challenge for us is to take those repeatable processes and ignore the variables that we can't control and focus it on the ones that we can.
Okay, thanks, Patrick. So just the, so I want to explain a little bit. So a project environment. So what's unique about a project environment versus a manufacturing environment? So in manufacturing, typically the process time to do something is fairly predictable. So like I set up the machine and I put this part in and then I produce the part. Typically it's highly reliable how long that cycle time is going to take. But in construction, that cycle time could be hours and it could change to days, right? It's like, oh, I show up and it's like, now I'm fighting weather. So now I got to plow snow before I can get to the materials I need. So the cycle time. So what's unique about project is the cycle time has huge variation. So doesn't the queue time between tasks. So it's extremely challenging in a project environment to implement these concepts because of that phenomenon.
It reminds me, if I could say, I saw this the other day. It's called Hofstadter's Law. Have you heard of that, Max? It's
No.
Hofstadter's Law is that it always takes longer than you expect, even when you take Hofstadter's Law into account. So it's kind of an interesting loop there that it goes through. But I got to tell you, a common theme that I heard Patrick and Brian and Stacy, you might have even touched on it, was moving a lot of the focus upstream. And I mean, something that, should resonate because of current events, is the supply chain issues that I think everyone's seeing. Moving our focus upstream has really helped us. I mean, we haven't emerged unscathed. And of course, this is not over by a long shot. But I'll tell you, we've been able to mitigate a lot of the supply chain issues electrically. Those things are a nightmare. I mean, things that used to be 2 to 4 weeks are 18 to 20 weeks because of the chipsets and the processors that are needed. But that focus, moving that upstream, has really paid dividends, because that's something that we also we used to focus a lot on shipping and a lot on scrambling to get things done in the end. That last week of production for a given component or piece of equipment probably had about 3/4 of the focus, over that span of whatever the delivery time was. 3/4 was in that closing stretch. You shift that 3/4 upstream, and now you can talk about, where can we get this component? Do we need to cross it to a different vendor? Do we need a different component altogether? Could we do a quick redesign? That it opens up the door even for that sort of thing. So I got to say, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too far, but I think we fared pretty well in the supply chain, and we've got good people doing that.
Great.
So, yeah.
So
yeah, I think the one challenge that we have is, so if you had your customers always be ready, be able to walk your shop floor, and there's their part sitting and you're not working on it. That's the one challenge that we have is, okay, we're going to allocate the resources to, we're going to go to Erie, and we're going to pull off this job in Altoona because we don't have all the material. That's the one challenge we have is, well, why aren't you working on it? Well, we don't have a full kit yet. Yeah, we haven't figured that one out yet.
It's very visible. What you do is very visible.
Yeah.
Sure.
yes,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Patrick's challenge is the customers on site every day looking at what's happening, right? So other companies don't have that situation. So I want to ask also the panel. So I've been in many companies where problems have been problems for so long that they just become normal conditions. I don't know if anyone can speak about that. Especially companies that have a long history of employees being there a long time.
Yeah,
then,
I think from our standpoint, so we've been in business since 1954, and we have a number of, especially at the supervisory level, we have a number of people that are 40 plus. So this thought process of, when you could start stuff, you just started it, regardless of whether you could complete it. I think one of the things you talked about, and correct me if I'm saying this wrong, Max, was to slow down, to speed up.
Yes.
That is just not, and I think it goes to what he said about the hero culture, is the fact that just because you can make a show, if you can't finish it, you can't finish it until you can finish it, and understanding what completion looks like and when it can really actually occur. Especially in our business, it's, if you start tasks too far, especially with weather related items, finish work can be damaged because you couldn't finish it. So I think that has been definitely a lesson that we've where the change of mindset has really been a good tool for us.
And so another comment I want to make, a lot of companies also I work with, people in the organization don't really understand who their customers are. So they do stuff and they don't really understand who's using that information or who they're supplying. And then, we get disconnects between what the work they're doing and then what the people downstream need. So I don't know if anyone makes a comment on that.
Yeah, I can take that one, Max. That was definitely a problem that we had here. It kind of twofold into your first question, your second question here. Just because of the longevity of some of the players in our process here, 40 plus, 30 plus years. It was that same old mentality. Well, this is how we've always done it. Well, certain processes are the drum beaters. Okay. And they have to understand, they're the ones that are feeding the next process down the line or 2 or 3 processes down the line. So, the customer isn't the person buying the unit when it ships. The customer is who's going to touch it next. And, getting them to understand that was difficult, because just because you have full kit on this job doesn't mean that you should be starting it. Okay. The start date for that job might not be for 5 more days. But we're starving this other area because we need to be doing this work. Maybe a intermediate process has to happen before the final process. And, another maxism is, some processes have to become less efficient before the entire process to become more efficient. And I think that's difficult for people to understand. It's not just your own agenda anymore. It's the overall it's the overall process itself.
And I think when people understand who their customers are and what their customers are expecting, it sort of changes some behavior. And so how we did that at actually ABC was, they have a lot of hand polishing that they do. And so that can be, it could take one guy 3 hours to do a job. It could take another person to do the same job 6 hours. And so we are having problems with, getting productivity through the polishing department. So one of the ideas we had was, well, how about if we push some of that pre-polish or, rough polish back to the welders? So let's get the welders to do some of that. And all of a sudden we found that the welding got a lot better.
Yeah.
when the welders have to do polishing versus sending it on to the next department. So if anyone wants to comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, you said it, Max. I mean, they didn't care about their customer until they actually had to do some of the work that their customer was doing. And so it gave them definitely a different perspective as far as, okay, I see the problem, and I can be part of the solution here. And it was just, simple activities like that are large eureka moments, for the organization.
And you meant,
go ahead.
sorry, go ahead, Patrick, please.
I think one of the things for us is, again, to the separation physically, is an appreciation of what an estimator in buying out a job and writing a contract and writing a purchase order, how that really puts the stress on a superintendent who, okay, so well, we got the purchase order out quicker. The superintendent can start his planning to get a full kit ready. So when work is ready to start, he's already done the pre-planning, he's ready, and he's got all the components. Well, if we have a situation where the PO is delayed, then the information to the superintendent is delayed, and now he receives the information for review when boots are on the ground. So now he can't spend that time to think. To Brian, to Max, your example about the welding and the grinding, for sure, we've had examples where in the field, if you have to do that final finishing process or fix what would end up being reworked later on, but it happens in the field, but it also happens, and I think more importantly in our industry, it happens more in the pre-planning and design phases than it does in the field, because yes, the cycle time is varied, the skill is varied, so it's not a machine, it's a person most times. But if you have the material, equipment, tools, and information, and you present that individual, whoever's doing the final install or who's at the point of install, there is some relative predictability as to how fast that can happen and how well that can happen. But if they don't have those other elements, for sure it won't happen.
Okay, so I'd like to open up to questions. So we only have a few minutes left here. So does anybody from the attendees have questions for our panel? You do type it in the chat box.
I don't see anything yet, Max, coming in.
Okay, while we're waiting, I'll talk about our upcoming events. So we have 2 operational excellence workshops coming up live in person. So one in Du Bois on March 8th, another one in Meadville on March 22nd. And we have our Lessons in Synchronous Flow workshop. It's an online session that happens the first Tuesday of every month for the next 4 months. The Synchronous Flow workshop is a free workshop, half day, just to start the mindset of what synchronous flow is about. And then the operational excellence workshop, the full day, focuses on really 4 paradigm shifts. So the first one is the inspection-based mindset that we just talked about earlier in the presentation. Second's about managing work. The third one is finance and the impact of financials, decision-making on the company. And then the last one on, like Brian said, to make the system efficient, most people need to be less efficient. That's a hard one for people to understand. So I still don't see any questions coming in. So before we wrap up, any final comments from our panelists?
I just going back to something Stacy said, if someone's considering undergoing something like some of the operational excellence initiatives, there's a lag time, but it'll hit. It took us, Stacy, I was kind of a little taken aback because it was almost exactly the same for us. It was about 3 months, and we went from somewhere in the low 70s in on-time delivery to 90% plus every single week in, week out. So just be patient.
And I want to also reiterate what Brian said. It's about following the rules. So once you get those rules established, you have to have the discipline to follow them, because most of the time what's causing the disruption is people not following the rules. So trying to be more efficient in their operation, that's hard.
Yep.
All right. Anything else from you, Max?
Nope, I think that's it for me. So again, our website, NWIRC's website, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I post every week different videos and different concepts. I've had a whole series on mindset shift for like the last probably 15 weeks. There's a lot of videos out there about different mindsets. So I have a whole list of mindsets I see in companies that need to have a shift.